We have a bit of a wild theory here today. It's a pretty bizarre one, so you may want to put your brain at the door before entering if you want to fully enjoy this one. Essentially, though, the first time I read through Edwin's story in both the Mimic and the Storyteller, I found a lot of the descriptive terms to be quite odd, particularly terms relating to Edwin. More specifically, I'm referring to the number of times that the sun is brought up in sentences. It ends up feeling like throughout Edwin's story, this unique word choice is a recurring pattern or theme for Edwin himself. And after noticing this, I couldn't help but think there might be some larger connection with Edwin and the daycare attendant, also known as the Sun and Moon animatronic. And with that out of the way, I just want to dive right into this. The amount of times this descriptive word choice happens in the story wouldn't be significant if it just happened once or twice, but let me read you just a few examples. Edwin awoke abruptly when his excited son landed on his stomach and screamed, "Sunshine, Daddy, let's play catch." Another example, Edwin blinked at the vivid yellow ray of sun that was streaking in through the closest window. Another example, as it always did on clear days, a sliver of blazing sunshine was piercing through the slats of Edwin's yellowed, sagging Venetian blinds. Unless clouds gave Edwin a reprieve, the sun speared him this way every morning. And yet another example, Edwin rushed out into the brilliant morning sun and breathed in a mouthful of humid air. And one more, just cause. Edwin came out of the lost time one morning on another sunny day. So we have a lot of sentences that are referring to the sun, and specifically mentioning it when it doesn't even seem necessary for all of them. But that by itself doesn't necessarily mean anything. So let's take a closer look into some of these examples and into the daycare attendant itself. The Tales from the Pizzaplex books describe the daycare attendant as follows. In its happy incarnation, the attendant was the sun, but he had a dark side called the moon, and the dark side was literal. If the lights went out in the daycare, the sun morphed into a leering, moon-faced clown wearing dark blue, billowy pants dotted with yellow stars. The moon would stalk around the daycare admonishing the children, "You've been very naughty." And the books also explain why the animatronic acts how it does to an extent, or at least what the employees know of it. And so that's described as, the sun robot was an old stage animatronic. Part of its theatrical shtick was to turn evil when the stage lights went off. When it was reprogrammed to be the daycare attendant, the performance functions were taken out, but the darkness trigger couldn't be removed. That, combined with the occasional blackouts in the daycare, created the moon side of the attendant, which results in several undesirable behaviors. I want to keep this in mind because we will come back to this later. As we read through Edwin's story, possibly the most important sentence to first analyze is the one that comes as Edwin is losing his child. We read the following. The sun was blotted out by a darkness that Edwin intuitively knew was coming from someplace within his soul. It may be a coincidence, but this is almost exactly how the sun and moon animatronic works. The animatronic is like a physical representation of this idea. The sun part of the daycare attendant is literally blotted out whenever the lights are turned off, which immediately manifests the moon side of the animatronic. This is just like how Edwin feels the darkness creeping from his soul, ultimately blotting out the sun. But is what I'm saying here a bit of a stretch? Well, sure, but we're not even done yet. There's also the connection between Edwin wanting to keep sleeping instead of being forced to face his reality. Edwin wants to forget everything. As the story tells us, it was the only thing he had left of a time that he shouldn't have been allowed to forget. Not that he hadn't tried. Edwin had spent the better part of 3 decades trying to forget. He'd run as far away as he could, all the way around the world. He doesn't want to have to keep living. Things like this are mentioned multiple times. For example, Edwin blinked and rubbed his face. He struggled to get his mental bearings, and when he got them, he wished he hadn't. Another example is Edwin shook his head, willing the memory to go back where it had come from. Blankness was better than the jagged shards of scenes like that. And yet another example, because Edwin knew, even as he continued to scream and foam at the mouth, that the real object of his anger was himself, and that infuriated him even more. He wanted to destroy himself, but he couldn't. Edwin's pain is overwhelming, and his inability to actually get rid of it causes him to lash out. He only cared about destroying Mimic, pulverizing the only real thing that Edwin could attack in an effort to annihilate his pain. The moon side of the animatronic is the perfect metaphor for this. In the same way that the darkness overwhelms the sun, when the moon side of the animatronic is activated, it immediately begins to lash out. It's violent and is completely unhinged, just like Edwin is when he destroys the Mimic. The animatronic and the inventor are both overwhelmed by the darkness, and this forces them into their violent outbursts. Neither of these characters have a healthy outlet for their suffering, and thus they immediately take it out on everyone else. I really think that the sun and moon dual character idea idea is a perfect mirror of Edwin's mindset. The sun is the cruel reminder that Edwin has to keep putting on a face, a fake smile, and the moon is the result of what Edwin's all-consuming darkness has turned him into. Neither of these two mindsets are healthy for him. He's stuck in a loop, reliving his past. The sun and moon are always in constant battle with one another to take control, and that's such a perfect representation of Edwin's battle with existence. He's eternally tormented by his past, and he despises himself, but neither avoiding reality or succumbing to darkness are helping him. Edwin continues to live in spite of it all, and the book shares a really interesting moment relating to that. Unless clouds gave Edwin a reprieve, the sun speared him this way every morning, yanking him from the sweet oblivion of sleep, forcing him to face existence yet another day. Edwin could have done something about the blinds. Even though he was renting the ratty little apartment, he could have replaced the ancient metal window coverings, or he could have added to it, hanging room-darkening curtains over it. For that matter, he could have just nailed a heavy blanket over the window. But he didn't do any of these things. Why? Because the light coming in through those blinds, however scourging it might be, was the only thing that got Edwin out of bed in the morning. While this seems kind of like a funny little paragraph, the idea behind it seems more meaningful when we connect this to the sun and moon animatronic. It could definitely be argued that this side of the daycare attendant is indeed still trying to do right. Just like how Edwin, while still full of nightmares in his mind, ultimately wants to stop the Mimic 1 program from bringing another catastrophe to others. The sun pleading with us to keep the lights on explains why this paragraph matters so much. If Edwin doesn't have any light, he knows he isn't ever going to do anything positive, but when he gets up, the inner struggle continues. It's sun and it's moon. Both exist together, and it's impossible to separate them. But let's touch again on the idea of Edwin wanting to escape reality. One, if not multiple, of the tales from the Pizzaplex books further expand on this idea of wanting to escape your reality, just like Edwin tries to do multiple times and fails. In one story, there's a moondrop dream sphere that works its way into a kid's memories, offering you a better fake life to live while providing you the reality you truly want. But ultimately, it's not real, and the story ends with the kid possibly dying in the real world. Edwin shares a similar concept, the difference being sleep is his only retreat as far as we know, and that's what he wishes he could keep doing. To quote, yanking him from the sweet oblivion of sleep, forcing him to face existence yet another day. It really makes Moon interesting to me, especially seeing that he's advertised in the Pizzaplex as a sleep-themed character. Even the marketing around the character has Moondrop candies that help the recipient sleep at night, while the Sundrop candies are energizing, helping you to stay awake. While it could just be that the candies are extra details to make the Pizzaplex feel more realistic, I can't help but think that maybe this whole Edwin connection is part of the reason that they're actually significant. Maybe they were something that was supposed to tie us back to this whole idea, but that may be a bit of a stretch. It just fits this theme so perfectly though. One other thing I want to talk about with the way the story words the sun descriptions is that this isn't just interesting for the sake of the sun being mentioned, but some of these sentences actually use more violent descriptors. Blazing sunshine was piercing through, and the sun speared him this way every morning, yanking him from the sweet oblivion of sleep, forcing him to face existence. Just like the words describe the sun piercing and spearing Edwin in a sense. The reason I need to point this out is because of the types of things that Moon says when the light is physically shining on him. Listen carefully to him here. Suddenly, the reason that Moon wants the lights off at all times during the games makes sense. The light physically hurts him. Metaphorically, he's having to face the world, facing reality. Light often wakes people up, and having to be awake means having to face reality, which is exactly what Edwin wishes he could avoid. Is this just another coincidence, or could this whole thing I presented actually be important? So all this to say, is Edwin literally possessing the daycare attendant? Possibly, but I don't think that's necessarily what they're saying here. I think it's more likely that the idea that's actually happening here is that Edwin is somehow connected to these characters, and that these branches of Edwin's self were infused into the Mimic, which helped to create this personality. Whether or not that was the actual Mimic itself, or if the Mimic 1 program was able to use Edwin in a sense to create this persona, I don't know. It could even just be some form of memories or agony put into the character. After all, Help Wanted 2 is crammed full of memories. We have memory plushies, a Fall Fest poster from before everything we know, we have old advertisements, and now with Secret of the Mimic, mimic, we're going back to that past that Edwin so desperately wants to forget. Facing reality means remembering the past. We're not really going to know some of that stuff until Secret of the Mimic comes out, but I find it extra interesting that the books explain that the darkness trigger could not be removed. It reminds me so much of Edwin's inability to escape his own mind. One sentence in the book even says, as he flew toward his son, Edwin knew he was running both toward something he'd never reach and away from something he'd never escape. Edwin has been unable to let go and move on, to forgive himself. He's constantly living in darkness, forever tormented by his grief and past decisions, forever and ever and ever. Wait, where have we heard that before?
We're jumping in a rock until the sun goes down, and the moon is shining forever and ever, forever and ever and ever.
Paper pals will be your friends forever and ever and ever.
Just kidding.
Hey everybody, put the radio on. Time to throw our troubles away. Hey, hey.